All right, let's talk about the wonders of the world. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's just a big travel bucket list, right? Well, today we're going to dig a little deeper. Because these incredible structures, they're not just tourist traps. They're part of this epic, ongoing conversation that humanity's been having with time itself. So, let's get right into it.
It's probably one of the most fundamental human questions, isn't it? As soon as we figure out that our time here is limited, we're faced with this huge, haunting idea. How do we outlive ourselves? How do we leave something behind, some kind of mark that screams, I was here, long, long after we're gone?
And for thousands and thousands of years, across pretty much every civilization you can think of, the answer has been surprisingly consistent. We build. We literally stack stones until they become mountains. We carve our legacies right into the face of the planet.
Okay, so this brings us to our first big idea. Let's call it humanity's immortality project. And it's a really useful way to frame this. We're not just talking about buildings, we're talking about this massive, collective effort that spans generations.
So here's the key takeaway. These places, they're so much more than just amazing feats of architecture. They're really psychological monuments. Think about it. They're born right at this incredible intersection of, say, a ruler's immense power, an architect's wild imagination, and a whole society's deep, deep desire to create something eternal. Something that can just stand there and defy time, nature, and even death itself.
So where did this whole idea of a list of wonders even come from? Let's jump back in time and look at the original bucket list.
You might be surprised to learn that this didn't start out as some big, official global competition. Nope, it was way more practical. We're talking around the 2nd century BCE, when Greek travelers started making these lists they called ethemata. And that word literally just means sights, or things you gotta see. It was basically the ancient world's first travel guide for the Greek-speaking world, a kind of greatest hits of human construction.
And here they are, the original 7. You've got the Great Pyramid of Giza, the only one you can still go and see today. Then there's the Hanging Gardens. We'll come back to those. They're a bit of a mystery. The Temple of Artemis, the Statue of Zeus, the Mausoleum at Halicarnassus, the Colossus of Rhodes, and the Lighthouse of Alexandria. But look at their fate, destroyed by arson, fire, and again by earthquakes. It's a pretty stark reminder that nature usually gets the final say.
This timeline? Wow, it really puts things into perspective. Get this, the Great Pyramid was already ancient history, like thousands of years old, by the time the Colossus of Rhodes was even built. And the Colossus itself, one of the most famous wonders ever, it only stood for 54 years, just 54 years before an earthquake took it down. It's just wild how fragile these massive bids for immortality can actually be.
Okay, so we've covered the what, but the really juicy question is why? Why go to all this trouble? Let's dive into the psychology behind it all, the architecture of awe. Okay, so here's a really fascinating psychological idea. It's called terror management theory. And the gist of it is this: because we humans are smart enough to know we're going to die, it kind of terrifies us. So to cope, we're driven to create things that will last longer than we will. For a pharaoh, the Great Pyramid wasn't just a fancy tomb, it was his shot at symbolic immortality. His body would be gone, but that mountain of stone, his legacy, that was built to last forever.
And then there's something called the awe effect. And you've probably felt this. When you stand in front of something truly massive, like a huge mountain or a towering cathedral, it has a real measurable effect on your brain. It kind of makes your own problems, your ego, feel smaller. And it makes you feel more connected to the people around you, to something bigger than yourself. Ancient rulers, they totally got this. These monuments weren't just showing off. They were tools. They were like a social glue to unify the people and basically say, look at the power we command. And the level of planning here is just incredible. I mean, check out this mind-blowing example from Chichen Itza in Mexico. If you stand at the bottom of the main pyramid and clap your hands, the echo that comes back sounds exactly like the chirp of their sacred Quetzal bird. Now, come on, that is not an accident. It's a perfect example of how these places were designed as full-on multi-sensory experiences, using acoustics and light to basically prove that the rulers had a direct line to the gods. Absolutely genius.
All right, let's fast forward a couple thousand years. How does the whole idea of a wonder of the world hold up in our crazy, hyper-connected digital age?
So back in 2007, a private foundation decided to create a new list of 7 wonders. But instead of a few scholars deciding, they threw it open to a global vote. And the response was insane. More than 100 million people voted.
Think about that shift. We went from a list created by a couple of Greek poets to a list chosen by, well, pretty much the entire world. Because today, being named a wonder means you're not just a historical site, you're a global brand. For a country, it's a huge diplomatic and economic win, what we call soft power. It drives tourism, which pumps money into the economy. In movies and video games, they're basically shorthand for ancient mystery. And in a world where everything feels digital and temporary, these massive stone structures feel like real, physical anchors to our identity. But, on the flip side, this branding has created a whole new problem, the Instagrammability crisis. Over-tourism is a massive issue, with people flooding these sites for the perfect photo, sometimes literally loving them to death.
Of course, like any story this big and this old, the wonders are surrounded by all sorts of myths, controversies, and legitimate problems. So let's peel back a few of those layers and get real for a minute. Okay, time for some rapid-fire myth-busting. First up, can you see the Great Wall of China from the moon? The answer is a hard no. It's just way too narrow and blends right into the landscape. Myth number 2. The pyramids were built by slaves. Nope. All the latest evidence points to a well-fed, highly organized, and paid workforce of skilled builders. These were respected members of society, not slaves.
But here's an even bigger mystery. What if one of the original 7 wonders never even existed? At least, not where we think it did. Get this, there is not a single Babylonian text from that time that ever mentions the Hanging Gardens. Not one. A growing number of experts now believe the whole story might have been about a garden in a totally different city, Nineveh, hundreds of miles away. A classic case of historical mix-up.
So you can see, getting that official wonder label is a real double-edged sword. On the one hand, it's amazing. It can unlock tons of funding for preservation, and it turns the site into this incredible global classroom. But there's a dark side. It creates this kind of ranking of history, making it seem like some places are more important than others. And as we said, it can lead to that crushing over-tourism that hurts both the site itself and the local communities.
So, after all that, where does this leave us? Let's wrap things up by thinking about what this ancient, timeless quest for wonder might mean for our future.
Because in the end, that's what these places are. They're not just dusty old relics from the past. They're mirrors. They reflect what a society truly valued, what it was afraid of, and what it desperately hoped would survive them. They're a snapshot of what a culture thought was worth making eternal.
And that really leaves us with one final, and I think pretty crucial question for ourselves. Our ancestors, they left their mark in stone. So what will our wonders be? Will they be digital? Will they be biological? Or maybe the greatest wonder we could leave behind is something restorative, like a healed planet. What are the monuments we are building today? And 1,000 years from now, when people look back, what are our wonders going to say about us?